Today I'm looking at the Amstrad PC1512. Now this is a system I've made a video on in the past, but if you ever watch that video, you can probably understand why I'm remaking it. The Amstrad 1512's name is derived from PC, meaning personal computer, 1 is the first in Amstrad's IBM PC Compatible line, and 512 is the amount of kilobytes in memory it has. The original internal code within Amstrad for the 1512 was Aero, reputedly standing for Amstrad's IBM ripoff. This was intended as a joke, as it was a serious worry for Amstrad to actually not be perceived as an IBM ripoff at the time. The design of the IBM PC was an open one, meaning it could be built from off-the-shelf parts. Mainly due to the speed, IBM wanted their original machine manufactured and shipped. All of the components were available to buy as standard, i.e. no custom components. All that is, except for the machine's BIOS. IBM retained the intellectual property for the BIOS, and therefore it was just not possible to rip the chip out and use it on a rival machine. It wasn't even possible to look at the IBM BIOS and copy it unless you wanted a hefty lawsuit on your hands. The only way to get around this was to give a specialist development team the specification of exactly what the IBM BIOS did and then work out a way of duplicating it using their own methods. This didn't always result in 100% compatibility, but it was usually pretty darn close, especially given the complexity of this method. Amstrad employed MEJ Electronics to recreate the IBM BIOS, who had previously put together the hardware for Amstrad's CPC and PCW machines. Amstrad had initially approached Locomotive Software to take up the task, who were responsible for writing BASIC on the CPC models. However, they declined due to the fear that IBM might pull a lawsuit against them regardless. Upon opening the IBM machine, MEJ discovered that most of the system architecture was made up of small discrete components on a hefty motherboard, typically an expensive way of doing things as opposed to creating custom chips that could take up the task of many of the smaller chips. This confirmed to Amstrad that the machine could be produced much cheaper and therefore become a player in the home and small business markets. First manufactured in 1986, the PC1512 was released after Amstrad had purchased the Sinclair name, along with its line of home computers. Amstrad had launched a couple of business-type machines, namely the PCW8256 and the PCW9512, a year earlier in 1985. These were dedicated to word processing use, but were affordable and filled the market gap of replacing typewriters. Alan Sugar wasn't ever a traditional boffin who got into the computing industry through passion. Instead, he was all business, as quoted in an interview.
We're not made up by a team of ex-graduates who are throwing a few electronic components in a plastic box.
This was Sugar's typical arrogant, slightly ignorant and simplifying style. And he got into the computing market as it looked lucrative. His tactic was to spot holes and try and improve on what already existed. Building on this, the 1512 was Sugar's attempt to create a serious computer and break into the IBM PC Compatible market. This home market was nowhere near as strong in the UK as it was at the time in the US, and Sugar saw an opportunity to change this. As with all Amstrads before it, there was some quirkiness with the machine. It also stuck to the tried and tested approach of creating something affordable, simple and reasonably spec'd.
Our objective is to produce mass market products at a very, very attractive price level and at the highest possible quality.
This multiple box ticking approach worked well in the UK and Europe, and as intended, it was one of the first PCs to land in this area. The UK PC magazine PC Plus even sold itself as for Amstrad PC 1512 and compatibles. However, even though advertising was aimed for home use, it also fared well in the office and business sectors. The standard machine shipped with up to two 5¼ drives or an optional hard drive alongside a disk drive. For video output, it featured an enhanced CGA graphic mode which could display 640 by 200 pixels with 16 colours, or grayscale depending on the monitor. The PC also shipped with 512KB of RAM and was followed up with the PC 1640, which as you can guess had the standard 640K of RAM. It also featured enhanced EGA compatible graphics. Rather uniquely, the power supply for the machine was built into the monitor, falling in line with Amstrad's CPC range. This also meant that the cable between the base unit and display was a unique round affair with 9 pins. with an additional 14-pin plug providing power from the monitor to the base unit, and a different video signal type, analog with composite sync. Microsoft had recently overtaken Digital Research as the largest operating system supplier, and Microsoft DOS was pretty standard on IBM compatible PCs. MS-DOS was in fact heavily based on Digital Research's CP/M operating system. Sugar approached Microsoft to license their software, but wasn't happy with the price offered. This came to the attention of Digital Research, who wanted to regain ground, and they swiftly brought all their support to the Amstrad PC with DOS+. They expected it to show the same success as the CPC and PCW series. However, near launch, Microsoft realised how big the 1512 could be in the European markets and revised its offer. Sugar, astutely, decided to then also include MS-DOS on floppy, and as a dual boot setup on hard disk drive versions. This unfortunately destroyed Digital Research's hopes of getting one up on Microsoft and massively limited their progress in these markets. Digital Research's DOS Plus was largely compatible with MS-DOS and also incorporated some features from CP/M with additional ability to read CP/M disks, but it was also a little bit slower than Microsoft DOS. As well as hard drive versions having a dual boot of MS-DOS 3.2 and DOS Plus, Amstrad shipped the machines with Digital Research's GEM Window system, standing for Graphic Environment Manager, which was heavily based on the Apple Mac OS. This is the same desktop which shipped with Atari ST models and had a reasonable feature set but never really gained traction in the market. Accessory-wise, the machine ships with a bespoke Amstrad mouse, which was incompatible with most software designed for the standard serial mouse. Rather uniquely and impressively, the keyboard had a port for the Atari 9-pin compatible joystick. The movements of the joystick could then be mapped to keyboard codes, which allowed users to take advantage of this control method, even in games that weren't designed to use anything other than keyboard controls. The monitor-based power supply meant that it was difficult to expand the machine, but it also meant that the machine was much quieter than a typical PC of the time. The monitor allowed for more vents and cooling, and therefore a noisy fan was unnecessary. Typically, a minority of users were upset about this and complained of overheating issues. And although these were unsubstantiated, it was enough to disrupt the market share of the machine, which had gone down well in home markets up until this point. Many ignorant people had assumed that Amstrad had left out a fan to cut costs. Alan Sugar repeatedly expressed to the press and media that it was unnecessary due to the increased convection cooling from the monitor case, and was quoted as saying, "I'm a realistic person and we are a marketing organisation. So it's the difference between people buying the machine or not, I'll stick a bloody fan in. And if they want bright pink spots, I'll do that too. What's the use of me banging my head against a brick wall and saying you don't need a damn fan, sunshine?" I, for one, can feel his pain here. The result of this was Amstrad started putting fans into HDD models shortly after, which, although ridiculous, was necessary to help stop the rumours. It is quite likely that the rumours of unreliability were started by the IBM sales team themselves, a dirty tactic that IBM were already known for at the time. As well as having a unique design, the pricing of the 1512 was substantially cheaper than IBM machines. The cheapest model, with a single floppy drive and monochrome display, was just £399, with the most expensive 20MB hard drive model tipping the scales at £949. In comparison, the cheapest IBM machine at the time was almost £1,500, with an inferior spec to even the cheapest 1512. The problem encountered by Amstrad was that people were happy to pay for the hard drive model over the cheap version, but not enough were produced. Combined with rumours of overheating, this led to the 152 not performing as well as it should or could have. Giving a run view of the specifications, the OS is MS-DOS 3.2 alongside Digital Research DOS Plus, and also shipped with a GEM desktop. The CPU is an Intel 8086 clocked at 8MHz. Storage is provided by one or two 360KB 5¼ floppies with an optional 20MB hard drive. RAM is 512KB, expandable to 640, video is CGA compatible, the display is monochrome or colour, sound is via the PC speaker. Ports included are that Atari joystick port on the keyboard, an RS-232C serial, parallel, mouse, keyboard, monitor power combined, and 3 full-length expansion slots accessible via the top-back panel. Rather uniquely and usefully, it also features a volume control for the PC speaker. Nowadays, these machines can be picked up pretty cheap. My PC1512 came from eBay for the reasonable price of £49.95 boxed. All in all, not a bad price. And to top it off, mine has been expanded to 640 kilobytes with a 30 megabyte hard drive installed. Now, we're talking. Thank you for watching my retrospective on the Amstrad PC1512. Plenty of system reviews in the future, plenty already done. Click on one, contribute to my Patreon if you want to support the channel, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, or just leave. It's entirely up to you. In any case, thank you very much for watching, and as always, have a good night.